Hey there, deep divers.
It's International Podcast Day, and to celebrate, we're going meta.
A deep dive into the history of podcasting.
Oh, wow.
You're probably thinking, okay, listening to a podcast about podcasts.
Isn't that a little too meta?
Haha.
But trust me.
The story of how this everyday tech became a global phenomenon.
It's full of surprises.
Okay.
You ready to hit rewind?
Absolutely.
I love how even the things we think are totally new have these fascinating backstories.
Right. Let's travel back to the early 2000s.
A time before pod meant anything other than that thing your headphones plugged into.
Yeah.
Even back then, the seeds of podcasting were being sown in some unexpected places.
Did you know that in the year 2000?
There's a service called My Audio to Go.
Yes.
It was a bold idea for its time.
You could download news stories to your PC or one of those bulky early MP3 players. Imagine that on-demand news. But before podcasts even had a name.
It's like a sneak peek into the future.
It didn't last, though, did it?
Unfortunately not.
My Audio to Go was ahead of its time, fading out after about a year.
But here's where things get really interesting. Around the same time, the New England Patriots
Patriots.
launched their own internet radio show called PFW in Progress.
Wait, Tom Brady and the gang were podcasting pioneers.
Seriously?
Well, not quite podcasting as we know it.
Back then, there wasn't a way to automatically download new episodes.
It was more like on-demand radio.
But it shows that even back then, people were hungry for a way to listen to what they wanted.
When they wanted.
It's wild to think that something we take for granted now.
Just subscribing to a podcast and having new episodes magically appear.
Was a technological hurdle back then?
Exactly.
And that's where those early 2000s tech trends come in.
Okay.
Blogs and RSS feeds.
Remember those?
Vaguely.
I know they were a big deal, but refresh my memory.
So RSS stands for Really Simple Syndication.
Though, ironically, it wasn't always so simple. Basically, it was a way for websites, especially blogs, to automatically send out states.
Whenever they posted something new.
Okay.
So how does that connect to podcasts?
Think about it.
If a website could automatically send out new blog posts.
Why not new audio files, too?
A few tech-savvy folks like Stephen Downes saw the potential.
He created an application called Ed Radio in 2003.
That gathered MP3 files from RSS feeds, kind of like a very early podcast app.
That's incredible.
So people were already piecing together the building blocks of podcasting.
Exactly.
And that brings us to two names that were absolutely crucial in pushing podcasting forward.
Okay.
Adam Curry and Dave Weiner.
Okay, I've heard Dave Weiner.
He was one of the early champions of RSS, right?
That's right.
He was a major force behind RSS, and he teamed up with Adam Curry.
A tech enthusiast and former MTV VJ.
Wow, okay.
They saw the potential of RSS to revolutionize audio.
And started experimenting with ways to deliver audio shows directly to people's computers.
And eventually their portable MP3 players.
So they were like the dynamic duo of early podcasting.
Exactly.
And their big breakthrough came in October 2003 at an event called BloggerCon.
BloggerCon.
Sounds exactly like what it is.
It was a gathering of bloggers, techies, and anyone passionate about the burgeoning world of online content creation.
At BloggerCon, Curry demonstrated a script he'd written.
That could automatically move MP3 files from a platform called Userland Radio.
See, sort of proto-podcasting platform to iTunes.
Hold on, iTunes.
As in Apple's iTunes.
They were in on this from the early days.
Not quite.
Remember, this is 2003.
iTunes was still primarily a music player.
But it was the way to get music onto your iPod.
Curry saw an opportunity to piggyback on that existing infrastructure.
His script was a game changer because it meant people could finally listen to these audio blogs.
As they were sometimes called on their iPods seamlessly alongside their music, this was a pivotal moment. Before that, listening to podcasts, though they weren't quite called that yet, involved a lot of technical know-how.
Right.
You need to understand RSS feeds, download the files manually, and then transfer them to your device.
So it's a pretty niche thing.
Yeah.
For tech-savvy folks.
Exactly. But Curry's script, along with the rise of early podcasting clients like iPod or X, later renamed Transistor, made the whole process much simpler.
Hold on, clients.
Yeah.
What does that even mean in a podcasting context?
Good question. Think of a podcasting client like a dedicated app for listening to podcasts.
Okay.
iPod or X was one of the first to have a GUI, or a graphical user interface.
Yep.
Basically, instead of typing in commands and dealing with code, you had buttons to click and menus to navigate.
So
it made podcasting accessible to a much wider audience.
so it's like the difference between the early clunky internet and the sleek apps we use today.
Exactly.
Making something user-friendly is a game changer.
Absolutely. But there was still one major hurdle.
Okay.
Remember how Apple wasn't exactly thrilled about the name iPodder?
Yeah. I can imagine their legal team wasn't too happy about that.
Exactly. There was a bit of a trademark dispute, which eventually led to iPodder X changing its name to Transistor.
Wow.
But here's the ironic twist. This little dust-up probably put podcasting on Apple's radar in a big way because in mid-2005, they made a move that would change everything.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
Yeah, hit me with it. Apple integrated podcasts directly into iTunes.
Row. Game over. That's like giving podcasting the royal seal of approval.
Exactly.
So.
Suddenly, podcasts weren't this obscure techie thing. They were right there in iTunes alongside music audiobooks, all easily downloadable to your iPod. It was mainstream acceptance on a massive scale.
So that's the turning point, the moment podcasting really takes off.
Absolutely. And from there, things start evolving rapidly. We see the birth of iconic podcasts like This American Life and Radiolab, which were already pushing the boundaries of audio storytelling.
Yeah.
Podcasting was no longer just about repurposing radio shows. It was a medium in its own right.
It's amazing how quickly podcasting found its footing, even though the technology was still evolving so rapidly back then.
It speaks to the power of the medium, I think. Podcasting offers this incredible intimacy, this direct connection between the listener and the host. It's like eavesdropping on a fascinating conversation.
Right.
And because the barrier to entry was still relatively low, it allowed for incredible diversity of voices and perspectives.
It wasn't all smooth sailing, though, right? I imagine there were some growing pains along the way.
Oh, definitely. As podcasting gained popularity, new challenges emerged. There were debates about monetization, ethical considerations, even legal battles over intellectual property.
Legal battles over podcasts. That's wild. Tell me more about that.
Well, remember that trademark dispute with Apple over iPodder? That was just the tip of the iceberg.
Wow.
As podcasting grew, some individuals and companies saw an opportunity to try and control the medium, to claim ownership of the concept itself.
Oh, wow.
There were attempts to patent podcasting technology, which, if successful, would have stifled the open and accessible nature of podcasting that had allowed it to flourish.
So what happened? Did those attempts to control podcasting succeed?
Thankfully, no. The podcasting community rallied against these attempts to enclose what was seen as a truly open medium.
Okay.
These legal challenges eventually fizzled out, and podcasting remained, for the most part, a wild west of creativity and innovation.
That's a relief. Imagine if someone had managed to patent podcasting. It would be a completely different world today.
Absolutely. It's a testament to the early podcasting pioneers who fought to keep the medium open and accessible.
So we've gone from those early experiments with RSS feeds and clunky MP3 players to podcasts being a mainstream form of media. What were some of the key moments that solidified podcasting's place in the world?
Well, we have to talk about the impact of The Daily back in 2017. That was a watershed moment for podcasting.
Right. The Daily from the New York Times. It's hard to overstate how big that was.
It was a game changer. The New York Times, this venerable institution, throws its weight behind a daily news podcast, and it resonates with millions.
Wow.
Suddenly, podcasting is front-page news, literally.
And it opened the floodgates. After that, every major news organization, it seemed, was launching their own podcast.
Exactly. It legitimized podcasting as a serious form of journalism, not just a niche medium for hobbyists.
Right. And then there's the rise of video podcasts,
Yeah.
which has added a whole new dimension to the medium.
Absolutely. It's fascinating to see how video has expanded the creative possibilities of podcasting. Now you can have interviews with people on the other side of the world. You can incorporate visuals and graphics. You can even see the host's reactions and interactions.
Yeah.
It's a much more immersive experience.
It makes you realize how much we communicate through body language, facial expression,
Yeah.
all those nonverbal cues.
Exactly. Video
Yeah.
podcasts tap into that, making the listening experience even more engaging.
For sure. It's amazing to think that we've gone from those early days of audio blogs and clunky MP3 players to this incredibly rich and diverse podcasting landscape.
It's a testament to the power of audio, the power of storytelling. and the power of technology to connect people and ideas.
Speaking of connecting people and ideas, we've got to talk about the numbers. Podcasting has exploded in popularity, hasn't it?
It really has. There are now over 546 million podcast listeners worldwide, and that number is only going to grow.
546 million. That's mind-boggling.
It is, and here in the U.S., nearly half of the population listens to podcasts monthly. That's huge.
Wow. It's clearly not a fad. Podcasting is here to stay.
Absolutely. And what's exciting is that we're still in the early days, relatively speaking. There's so much potential for podcasting to evolve, to experiment, to push the boundaries of what's possible.
So what's next for podcasting? Any predictions?
Well, one thing's for sure. Technology will continue to shape the medium. We're already seeing the rise of AI-powered tools that can help podcasters edit their audio, transcribe their episodes, even create marketing materials.
Yeah, AI is changing everything these days, so it makes sense that it's having an impact on podcasting too.
And then there's the metaverse. Imagine listening to a podcast in a virtual reality environment, where you can interact with the hosts and other listeners in real time.
That's wild. It sounds like science fiction, but who knows? It could be the future of podcasting.
Or maybe we'll see a rise in hyper-personalized podcasts, where algorithms curate content specifically for your interests.
The possibilities are endless.
Yeah.
It's an exciting time to be a podcast listener, that's for sure.
Absolutely. And on that note, happy International Podcast Day. May your listening queues always be full of engaging and thought-provoking podcasts.
You're here. And to all our listeners out there, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the history of podcasting. It's been a fascinating journey, and we can't wait to see what the future holds for this amazing medium. Until next time, keep exploring, keep listening, and keep those earbuds handy.